Before service, Brother Patterson would either give out chewing gum or candy to kids. A very simple call. Everyone's call. We have a call to live out our life in whole, as a whole person in every way. The simple call that is being given in this scene is the call that goes out to everyone there. If you back up just a little bit to verse 21, it says, a great crowd gathered around Jesus. They had a very simple call. Come to Jesus. But there is not just everyone's call, there's also a secret call. Listen for a secret call. A gentleman named Brenning, when he was very young, in fact is just a baby, he got what's called a whooping cough. Now at the time he was born in the 30s, that was very, very serious because it may take a baby's life. And so, of course, his family was watching over him, especially his mother. And one day, the cough sounded so bad, she went out to the barn and prayed and begged God to spare Brenning's life. Well, God did. He answered her secret call, prayed in a barn where she was alone. But you know, God gave Brenning a secret call too. Because in his late teen years, he felt a call within him that only he could identify with. It was a call to be a preacher. And so he responded, yes. Now his name in full was Fred Brenning Craddock. And he was a professor of Davis Chapel. Some of you have heard him preach. Now, I tried to get in his classes too, but let me tell you, I never could get in. In the last semester I was in seminary, I begged him to get in his class, but it was already full. You see, he, like his mother made a secret call, he had from God a secret call to follow him. You ever had a secret call to go get something accomplished and you know it was from God? Any hands raised? You had a secret call? I don't see any hands. Maybe there was some. A secret call. Well, Jesus has a secret call to the girl who has died. He says, Talitha cum, little girl, get up. Her secret call. And she comes to life. There is also a call of circumstances. I'm sure you've had that too. Wednesday, I believe it was, I got a phone call from Jay that his mother, Maggie Povlin, had died. Now, that was not a personal secret call, but a call of circumstances. My whole plan for the day changed. All of a sudden, rather than visiting those I'd already scheduled to visit, I had Julie call them and tell them they would need to be rescheduled because of what had happened. And she told them what had happened. I had plans for that afternoon to knock on some doors. I couldn't knock on the doors. My plans had changed. A call from circumstances. Ever had that? Suddenly your plans changed. Jesus is on the way to the Sea of Galilee in order to teach the crowds. Oh, we don't really know. It said that's where he's on the way, but that is a place where Jesus quite a bit got in order to teach the crowd. And that may be what was happening, but his plans changed. Jairus came to ask him, come to my house. My daughter's sick. And of course, as we heard, as Jesus answered, word got to Jairus that his daughter had died. But Jesus' call from circumstances changed. So as the text says, he went with him. That is, he went with Jairus. Pay attention to your call, even when it calls for a change of plans, a call from circumstances. There is another call, and it goes like this. Expect challenges to your call. Expect affirmations, positive things of or challenges to your call. So many times, it's what we don't want to do. When I was appointed here, a new challenge was faced. I began reading about the church. A layperson here sent me the history of the church. I read it. I also read about the community around us. What's the average age? What do people most listen to in music? When it comes down to it, where do they feel? Where do they get most of their news? I'll give you answers to those questions later, but those were the type of questions I asked. I was beginning to get myself familiar to the community because I had new challenges. I already knew. I was in my 8th year at the community where I was. And as a matter of fact, people began to say in my 5th year, you are our trusted leader. That didn't happen in the 1st year, not the 2nd, not the 3rd, not until the 5th. So I knew and know there is a lot of work to get before I'm at that level. I'll be pleasantly surprised if someone outside this church tells me I'm a trusted leader before the 4th year. That's a challenge to my call. Or when I speak to you, and I've found something has personally changed in your life. That's another challenge to me to know specifically how to respond to you. Because if the same very thing happens to another person, that call is not going to be the same. But there's affirmations of your call, too, where you're reminded the next day you are called to follow Christ. Some of you may be familiar with Polaroid. Any of you heard of Polaroid cameras? This is the story of its leader. His name was Edwin Land. He said the first thing you do is teach the person to feel that their call is very important and nearly impossible. That draws out the drive to win. He admits both the affirmation, persons are called, and the challenge, because it must have drive to be a winner. Like many inventors, they try hundreds and sometimes thousands of times to invent what they are after. Was it Edison that invented the light bulb? Is that right? He said it took 1,000 times to finally get one that worked. I'm sure he had some affirmation to keep working on it because maybe he was getting a little closer every time. But a challenge took more time and more trials than he expected. The law of awareness is to be aware of a call you have within you. The law of awareness is to know that it may sound impossible to follow through with your call and make it reality. But the law of awareness is to remember calls that sounded impossible, yet when you worked on them to bring them to reality, you got there. Your call became fulfilled. Who would have ever guessed that the call of Jesus Christ to become a human being, as impossible as that sounds, God becoming a human being, or Jesus' call to die, and somehow in the death of one person, every human being from the very beginning of time to the very end is set right with God. Doesn't that really sound impossible? But he faced the challenge, and it became reality. And who would ever believe that one condemned to die on the cross, which the Old Testament says only one totally condemned by God dies on a tree? And yet, in the individual that suffered that total condemnation is our hope. And that God raised him, the totally condemned, from the dead. And the resurrection of one individual contains all the hope that we have. All of it. Every last bit. But not only that, that one, Christ, who died and was raised, sends his Spirit to live in every one of us so that we can do the impossible for him. What an affirmation Jesus had, as 3 times the Father says to him, "You are my Son." What challenges he faced, rejected at so many places. From his home, he was turned away. But even with those challenges, he accomplished the impossible, setting every one of you straight with God. Forgiven, empowered, living. Be aware of that. And when you wonder whether or not you can do something for Christ, he's calling you to do, just know there's challenges. There always is. But also know, in that moment, your call is affirmed. Christ has died for you. He has been raised. He sends to you your Spirit so that you can be aware of the impossible. And the people of Christ said, Jesus calls us o'er the tumult. As we sing today, who knows, there may be